everybody. We're here this afternoon and we're going to shoot our part 2 of our saddle tree video. You know, we talked about in part 1 the angle of the bars versus the width of the gullet, and we really covered that angle in the front. Today we're going to cover the bars themselves. And so we've got Buttercup out here with us, and we're going to be also showing Doll here in a little bit. And so as we get into this, I want you to really pay attention, because there's going to be some things in here that it might get a little deep, but you really do need to understand these things. Okay? Okay. Now, one of the things I wanted to show is there's a lot of the bars of the tree are cut out of a piece of wood, not exactly like this piece of 2x4, but this piece of 2x4 will illustrate the point that I want to make here. And a lot of saddle companies, when they make the bars of the saddle tree, they cut them and they're just as straight from here to here as this piece of 2x4 is. Now, if I were to take this piece of 2x4 and put it on this horse's back, see, straight from here to here, look how much room I have underneath this horse's flank area here, or the middle of the back. Because, see, Buttercup takes what we call the Nueva tree. She's got a lot of dish in her back. If I were to set this up here on her back, look how much room we have here, because she's got a lot of what we call dish in her back. Okay? Now, even if I were to shape this to where it was more like a bar, so that the end had a little bit more curve here, a little bit more curve here, and put it on her back, you'd find that it still bridges. The other thing is, because this and this are cut at the same angle, as I put this up here and I put this on her back at the angle it needs to be in the front, you would find that it digs in here and has a gap up here, because this angle and this angle are two different things. Okay, now this bar came off of our little saddle tree that we've taken apart to show all the different parts of it. This bar is the bar that goes on the Lynn Special. Okay, now you'll notice, first off, you'll notice that this bar, see, comes this way, but then it's got a nice curve this way. Plus, this bar also looks like somebody took it and twisted it this way, so that this angle in the front and this angle in the back are two different things. See, if I hold this straight up and down in the front, look how much angle I've got here in the back. Okay, now remember, she doesn't take a special, but just for illustration purposes. Okay, for illustration purposes, let's just lay this up here. Okay, we put it here in the front. You'll see that's kind of where it's supposed to fit in the front. And then in the back, okay, this is not a perfect fit for her, because remember, this is not the bar that she needs. She needs a Nueva bar. But the special bar will give you a good idea. But you can see this comes closer, or a nice fit there. This sure comes a lot closer to fitting over the back. Because, you know, in our modern horses, we talked about, we don't have that big round back anymore. But we still have a lot of width in the hips. In fact, we may have more width in the hips now than we had in those old horses. So we've got a lot of angle here and much less angle here. Okay, now we're going to bring Doll in a minute, and we're going to show you the difference between the Doll's back and Buttercup's back as we talk more about our trees and our bars in our trees. One other thing we do want to mention when we're talking about this top line, if you'll notice, on Buttercup, she has what we call a long withers. See how far it is from the point of her wither to where this wither ties in back here in her back. Okay, because this is so long and there's such a drop here, then as it comes back up to the point, you get a lot of rise, and that's what leads to that pretty big, what we call dish in these horses' back. So if the wither ties in really deep back here, then you can't use a saddle tree that's pretty flat, because then you end up with this. Okay, in talking about our angles on our saddle tree, remember, this was our front, okay? And on our front, we have these angles right here. Now, on our cantle, here's the angle of our cut on the cantle, or cantle. Okay, now you can see pretty readily that there's a huge difference in the angles that these two cuts are made from, because we have a lot more slope in the shoulders in the front, and then in the back or up over those loins, the trees need to flatten out in order to get a nice smooth contact from front to back, because what we're looking for is total contact from front to back with this horse. Now, I believe, if I remember right, from back in the days when we were doing the Breton shell pads, if we were to measure the total amount of contact in the horse's back, I believe there's like 200 square inches of contact. Okay, so now you've got to take the weight of the rider and the weight of the saddle. Depends on which rider you're talking about. A man's a lot different than a woman, but let's just, for illustration purposes, talk about 150, 175, 200 pounds total weight between the saddle and the rider. And again, it depends on the size of the rider, but what we're looking at, say 200 square inches, 200 pounds would be 1 pound per square inch of pressure. Okay, if this tree doesn't fit and we got a lot of contact here and some contact here, but we're bridging in here, we might be losing 60, 70 square inches of surface area. And so then we're putting a lot more pressure here and a lot more pressure here, causing the saddle to make what is more commonly known as hot spots. Okay, we've talked about the angle of the bars in the front. We've talked about how the gullet width is not the big issue as far as saddle fit is concerned. It's more the angle of these bars. We've talked about the shapes of the bars. We've talked about the angle in the back. We've talked about the difference in the horse's back. We've talked about how the bar itself needs to look like it's kind of twisted, so we get a lot steeper angle in the front, a lot less angle in the back. And so now we've got our finished tree. This was Doll, and remember on Doll, the special tree, this is what this one is, Lynn's Special, is the one that fits her the best. And so we'll put this up here and you'll see this is a pretty nice fit. Nice fit around the front in here, no gap here, nice fit here in the back. Okay? Now, the last thing we want to talk about is the way the saddle is rigged, because you can take this tree right here, and if you don't rig it correctly, you can make it just as ill-fitting as any of the other trees out there. Now, what happens in most saddle makers is they want to put this front rigging right directly underneath these swells. When you put the rigging right here, and when you tighten that down, this is what happens. You see how that tree begins to dig in the front? You see what happens back here in the back? So then they got to put a back gird on here and pull the back down. makes it very inconvenient. What we've done on Lynn's saddle is not an in-skirt rigging. In-skirt riggings will do the same thing. Pull that saddle down in the front. Well, on Lynn's, the rigging is connected to the saddle tree. You'll see that this is a V shape. It's connected to the front here, to the back here. And when you girt your saddle up or tighten your saddle or gird up on your saddle, you'll see pulls the front and the back together, and so you get a nice smooth pull front to back all the way down the horse's back on your saddle tree. Back girt, not a necessity. A lot of people like to use them. If you like to use them, great. If you don't, we find that a lot of times they get in the way when we're kicking, and so we like to take our back girts off. Saddle makers say, I gotta have a back girt, can't sell a saddle without a back girt, but we don't use them. So you can rig this both in the front, you can rig it all the way in the back, or you can make a V out of it. And the way we normally, kind of our normal deal, is to make the V. But it, again, depends on the length of the horse's back, whether we want that saddle sit a little bit further forward or a little bit further back. But I want you to notice on Doll, look where this elbow is. This is where the saddle fits on Doll. Every saddle has a pocket. And when you put that saddle up there, you can't put it up there like that, because that shoulder will begin pushing that saddle back, and it's going to end up back here, it kind of in the pocket where that saddle's going to go. You can put a breast collar on there and tighten that up, try to hold that up here, and what you're going to do is end up with a horse that's sore, because you got to let that saddle fit where it's supposed to fit. Okay, see you in another video. And guess what, we made this whole thing and Lynn hadn't said a word. Can y'all believe that? Talk to you later.